viewers, and welcome to our program, The Business Brief, which we hold weekly to unpack some of the complex matters arising in our economy. This afternoon, we are blessed to be hosting two economists. To my right is economist Persistence Gwanyanya, and to my left is Dr. Prosper Chitambara. Welcome, colleagues, to the program. So our discussion this afternoon is centered on the issue of inflation and our economy in general. It has been giving a lot of citizens quite some headaches and has made headlines both locally and beyond the borders. But lately, we have seen some measures being put in place, noting that our inflation levels were around, annual inflation was around 60% at the close of 2021, and right now we are talking about 257% thereabout, economist Gwanyanya. What do you think has led us to this point?
Thank you. The increase in inflation in Zimbabwe is largely linked to the developments on the foreign currency exchange market. So you find out that during the period you're talking about, we also experienced depreciation of the local currency. If I remember well, at the beginning of the year, the local currency exchange rate, interbank exchange rate, or the auction rate was around 1:108. In the alternative market rate, it was also around 1:200 thereabouts. But by the same period you talking about where inflation had peaked to 257%, you find out that the exchange rate it also depreciated significantly to around 400, above 400, 1:400. But in the alternative market, the exchange rate is also depreciated to around in the regions of 1:850 thereabouts. So today, inflation or price stability in Zimbabwe is largely linked to the exchange rate dynamics. So the question it would be wise to center our discussion around more on the exchange rate depreciation dynamics or exchange rate dynamics of the country.
Okay. No, I'll have to cut you short there and move on to Dr. Chitambara.
Yes, sir.
His take is that this is a game which largely has to do with the depreciation of the exchange rate. What is your take? How have we come from 60%, 257%?
I largely agree. Of course, in economics we also say as a monetarist that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. We've seen an increase in liquidity. Broad money supply in general has increased quite unsustainably over the past years, and external developments also arising out of geopolitical developments in terms of the crisis between Ukraine and Russia also put an upward pressure on commodity prices. And we saw the price of fuel, for example, increasing quite significantly, reaching, I think, probably an all-time high of around $140 per barrel, I think around March thereabouts. Of course, now we thank God the prices have been coming down, which is a boon for the global economy and obviously also for Zimbabwe. Then when you look at agriculture production output, it has actually declined because of below normal rainfall season that we actually had. So obviously that puts pressure on food pricing. Yeah, actually I was reading the midterm budget and the Minister of Finance is saying agriculture this year would decline by 5%. Last year our agricultural sector increased by about 33%. So that's a massive decline, which obviously has a direct effect in terms of the pricing of food. But we thank God again that our winter wheat has been good. I think we are projecting at around 370,000 tons of winter wheat production against national demand for the whole year of around 400,000 tons. So I think in terms of wheat, I think we seem to be on the right direction.
Okay, now coming back to you, persistence. There's been an argument, rather. I've even come across academic papers which are alluding to the fact that perceptions have also played a much bigger role within this dichotomy where we see prices going up. That there are perceptions, self-fulfilling prophecies. Yes, something maybe in that context where we see citizens rather being on the side where they expect prices to go up than to go down. Also is a factor leading to the escalation of inflation. What is your take on that?
It is very true, and also largely reflective of the structure of the economy and the journey we traveled as an economy. If you look at where we're coming from a situation of having experienced hyperinflation, a situation of having lost wealth from the different currency regimes that we adopted over time, the currency reforms therefrom. So the memories of those losses and hyperinflation are still fresh in the people's minds. They are also therefore expected to act accordingly. So the behavior of the people in the economy has also been a very key driver of the inflationary pressures and of currency depreciation we're experiencing as an economy. But behavior is not only coached around the history or the journey we traveled, but also from the structure of the economy, which is a monopoly driven or characterized economy. So there is a few large entities in the economy and individuals who wield so much power to influence the direction of exchange rate and prices. So they will tend to take advantage of that weakness of the economy, and we have seen it reflecting in most of the challenges or pressures, inflationary pressures, episodes of inflation, this structure of the economy. So you have heard about the contractors driving their effect in driving the exchange rate depreciation and inflation. We have heard about the large key players who were also borrowing, using their muscle to borrow and driving the money supply growth and participating in the alternative market and pushing up the exchange rate. So essentially enterprising around the structure of the economy, enterprising around the monopoly structure of the economy. So all those issues combined together with the issues my brother has talked about, that is the geopolitical issues and the domestic issues, have created the levels of inflation and currency depreciation that we see today.
Okay. Mr. Chambar, Dr. Chambar, sorry. What persistence is simply alluding to? Now the big concerns
what we had seen, the government had to bite the bullet. The difference with the approach now of late is the government had to come up with big bang approaches. So from Treasury, you all heard about the interventions where the Treasurer, which is the Permanent Secretary of Finance, has taken aggressive measures to deal with the tendencies around procurement, government procurement, which were driving up inflation and exchange rate depreciation to the extent of overpricing of government for goods and services. So we have seen aggressive measures and the formation of the value for money unit, which is basically tasked with dealing with the procurement process to ensure that government creates value for the money, and aggressive measures to support these measures from the Reserve Bank, which is a tight or hawkish monetary policy stance typified by a sharp interest rate of 200%, which is the bank rate, and of course the gold coins you have mentioned, and other interventions by the central bank. This time I think could be different, because if you look at the recently held Zimbabwe Development, the Economic Development Conference in Victoria Falls, the president also weighed in on the measures from Treasury and supported by the Reserve Bank, which indicate to you that there is political will in getting these measures successful. So I think going forward, we are likely to see this response in the market through stability to continue and to be sustained, which is what we want. We have started to see the exchange rate in the open market firming up. It was previously around 1:800, 850.
900.
Yes, even 900. It has now gone. It has now started to firm up to around 1:600, 650, or 700, depending on the transaction. So we have started to see that happening, and we only hope that this is going to continue. I'll talk about the adequacy of the measures. So the high interest rate policy tends to affect everyone who is borrowing in the economy. But look here, I talk about the structure of the economy, that it is concentrated in the hands of a few. So it is unsurprising that there are a few who are driving the exchange rate depreciation, and a few who are driving price escalation. But because the interest, the inflation has been taken so high, we tend to use the interest rate policy as a blunt instrument. So it's a blunt instrument to that extent. So the next step that I expect Reserve Bank to now do is now to look at the structure of the economy and how to address the effect of that structure of the economy on the final inflation outcome. So we see inflation coming down, and these drivers of inflation also being addressed to the extent they have been driving this inflation. So as that starts to happen, maybe it can happen through some prudential. Those are the tools that we have. There's some prudential interventions, prudential limits on borrowing. For example, one corporate can borrow in the economy significantly through using its guarantee, a guarantee to its suppliers, a guarantee to its off-takers, a guarantee to its contractors, a guarantee to its affiliates, a guarantee to its subsidiary. So they are just using, you can just use your monopoly power, but to drive the inflation and the exchange rate. You and me will only be caught in the mix. So I think the next stage now is to look at how the structure of the economy, some interventions around the structure of the economy, so we start to see inflation coming down in earnest, to start to see exchange rate appreciation, the Zimbabwean dollar appreciation being sustained.
Okay, no, thanks so much for that explanation, Persistence. Now, coming to you, Dr. Chitambara, Persistence has just raised quite a number of issues here. Talks about interest rates being increased as part of a planned policy to deal with the indiscipline. But within the matrix, there are some companies who are now raising concerns that the borrowing rates are quite too high. Don't you think these measures will also downplay other stakeholders within the economy who are trying to access lines of credit? Which path should we pursue? Should we lower the interest rates, save the rest, or keep them high to instill discipline? What is your take on that?
So normally, when you're in chronic high inflation, you need to ensure that at least real interest rates are actually positive. So what the situation we had was a situation where we had negative real interest rates. And of course, because of that, we're also now witnessing these speculative borrowings. So I think what's important is to sustain the anti-inflationary package of measures or reforms. Because once we do that, then it will be easier now for the interest rates to be adjusted downwards. Yeah, so yes, it's a blunt instrument. It's a double-edged sword, if you want. Those that are genuinely borrowing money for productive purposes are affected, and as well as those that are borrowing for non-productive, speculative activities. So my take on that one is that we need to continue with the stabilization of the economy as a way also of addressing the issue of the high interest rates, which increase the cost of borrowing money.
Okay, now Persistence. We also have seen a trend where we are seeing that there are quite increased inflows of foreign currency into the country. There's also surging confidence among the banking public who have been able to access their foreign currency from their accounts at any time. But what then needs to be done to transform those earnings to make them valuable to the economy, like encouraging these deposit holders to lend their money or to encourage them to invest such kind of monies into the economy? Because I understand we've got quite enough inflows to kickstart this economy. What do you think is the stumbling block there?
So one thing that is very clear from the inflows you're talking about is that they are concentrated in the hands of a few, which is reflective of the monopoly structure of our economy. So whilst the inflows have increased, they may not necessarily translate to increased liquidity, foreign currency liquidity in the economy. Most of them are sterilized in the bank. So the concern really is about the structure of the economy. And you find out that even that concentration would be supported, or the incentive to liquidate the US dollar holdings is supported by stability in the economy. So when we start to have stability, in my view, a number of things will start falling in place. So we're getting to a stage where we're going towards stability. And it is my hope and expectation that even the deposits that are sitting in the account can now start to find their way in the market through liquidation. But what is also interesting is the tight monetary policy stance that has been taken by Reserve Bank has also created a situation of tight Zimbabwean dollar liquidity. So we are likely to see even liquidation of the US dollar holdings, provided the exchange rate now is now gotten to some measure of equilibrium. It makes sense for those that are holding the foreign currency to do so. So we are in a transition period, and we should be very clear of what we want to achieve without necessarily promoting dollarization of the economy. So what I think is, when given the progress, the developments in the economy currently, we're creating a tight Zimbabwean dollar liquidity, and the appeal of Zimbabwean dollar has been increased by the gold coins, and we now expect that, given that, there should now be a measure of increased acceptance of the Zimbabwean dollar to continue creating demand for the Zimbabwean dollar. So if that happens, we are going to be sustaining our own currency. So what is very clear is, it is easy to get this economy back on rail, and it will also be easy to sustain this. Look here, it was very clear even from the discussions we had in Victoria Falls that government has got the arsenal, government has got the power to influence the direction of the economy. Now that it controls more than 70% of the economy. And the reaction that came out of the interventions by Treasury and Reserve Bank clearly support that government has power. So if government continues on the same path, we are likely to see sustained stability, and we are likely to see a return to normalcy.
Okay, Dr. Chitambala, I've had several conversations with the citizens, ordinary general members of the public, and their view is that their perception on stability is exchange rate equilibrium, where we see parallel market rates and the official market rate converging.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
That's a very good assessment by citizens. So in economics, normally we have a number of indicators of stability, macroeconomic stability. Even when you do modeling, you can either use the inflation rate, the annual inflation rate, or you can use the black market premium, which is essentially the difference between the official and the black market exchange rate. So it's a good indicator of instability or stability within an economy. Okay. So yes, it's important that we keep track of the premium. We keep track, obviously, of inflation. We keep track of the purchasing power parity.
Now, turning back to you, persistent still, zeroing in on this matter. What would be your word to the citizens, members of the public, our viewers in general, on these perceptions of stability? To say, for us to achieve stability, let us converge the local currency and the US dollar. I've seen in my general researches that in most countries across Africa, it's rare that the exchange rates have really come to converge. But it seems it's still the demand back home. It's was a yardstick being used to judge stability.
So I think there should be some acceptable levels of premium between the two rates. Reserve Bank has been using, I think, around 20% as the target premium.
Okay.
But to achieve stability, given that a requirement for an acceptable premium, it means there should be equilibrium between the two rates or the two markets.
Okay.
So when we get to a point of equilibrium, we are essentially in equilibrium. We've essentially achieved stability.
Okay.
So what you want is not necessarily the level of the exchange rate, but you want that exchange rate at a certain level. The volatilities of that exchange rate to be well managed at a certain level, and the gap between the two exchange rates to be well managed within the certain within a certain range that is of premium.
Yeah.
So what you also need is something that will sustain the Zimbabwean dollar. It should not be temporary. That's why I'm saying the tight monetary policy stance of Reserve Bank should not be a very short-term measure. But the next step, so we address the issue permanently, is now to drill down from a tight monetary policy stance into the key drivers, given the concentration of the economy, of the exchange rate depreciation. Now, the Ministry of Finance has started doing that. They've started looking at the government procurement process, noting that government constitutes more than 70% of market power. So if contractors, suppliers of government were charging an exchange rate of 1:1,500, for example, against the interbank rate of 1:400, there's no way the exchange rate was not going to run. So if government, through the value for money unity, as it has started to do, effectively deals with this issue, it means there is no capacity now of anyone who is paid by government to go into the alternative market and drive the alternative market. Before the intervention, the temptation was always to offload huge amounts of money in the alternative market and driving exchange rate depreciation. So every time we could see blaming each other to say these are the ones that are driving exchange rate. But government itself came out very clear to say, we did the investigations. I think within government we could be culprit, and let's commit to dealing with this issue. So I expect that to sustain stability if government honestly and genuinely commit to those measures. Look here, if government starts to pay you at the appropriate exchange rate, if you don't have the foreign currency from on resources, or if you don't have access to the auction system, there's no way you can then go into the alternative market. Yes, and driving the alternative market. So what we have seen within a short space of time is the massive strengthening of the Zimbabwean dollar. And it is clear it is coming from those measures. Then the gold coin, it has a very strong announcement effect. So what you see now is, it is not necessarily the quantum of money that was driving exchange rate, but it was its velocity. Because every time you are paid in Zimbabwean dollar, the next thing is you want to offload. So what the gold coin, the wisdom of the gold coin is, you create an asset and give access to everyone to that asset, which is linked to the most sought out asset in the world, which is gold. So what that does is to stabilize all the demand for foreign currency. So if you are paid today, you can afford to wait until your chance comes. If a contractor is paid today, if a big corporate is paid today, they can afford to wait until their chance comes.
So, economist Chitambari,
Yes.
yes, these are interventions on the policy side, but to some citizens, they are asking, where will this take us to? Is this going to create jobs for us in the long term and so forth? So, what other areas do you think need consideration, in the part of these policymakers, apart from these monetary interventions? Which other areas do you still need to really rework on. Yes,
Yeah.
because I've been seeing that, almost everyone's eyes is focused at the Reserve Bank and the Treasury, yet there could be some pockets which still need to be addressed in order to harness these benefits of the sustainability.
Yeah, no, I would say I think the reform agenda needs to be quite comprehensive, very broad. Institutional reforms, that's another important area that we need to probably expedite. The reformation of parastatals, state enterprises. I think it's something that's been on the radar for a long time, but we haven't made, I think, the kind of progress that we would expect it to make. So I would say I think that's an area that we need to focus a lot of attention as well at government level. But I know there could be this resistance to reform parastatals, especially from line ministries. A lot of the line ministries still want to continue to have control over parastatals because it's beneficial for them to do that. Yeah. But I think it's an area that needs a lot of attention because we're actually losing money instead of actually these institutions contributing to GDP. When you go to countries like China, they contribute a lot to GDP, around 45% of GDP. Yeah, I think it's only about 3%. Yeah, then I think for the citizen, is interested, you mentioned it correctly, in jobs. In the current environment, it's a bit difficult to create jobs because of the instability, the high inflation. Even when you look at our investment, whether it's local investment or even foreign investment, we haven't been doing well. I think it's because of uncertainties, macroeconomic uncertainties on account of chronic high inflation. The ordinary person is also interested in public spending, the pattern of public spending. Where are we spending our resources on? What are we spending our resources on largely? So the citizen is interested in health spending, education, social protection. I was looking at the numbers in terms of food insecure citizens. It's actually 45% of our citizens are food insecure. And we also have a significant proportion of our citizens that are in absolute poverty, in abject poverty, if you want. And obviously, one way of dealing with poverty is through enhancing spending on the sectors that enhance the well-being and the welfare of the ordinary citizen, which is your health. Of course, I'm not going to go into the numbers. The numbers are a bit embarrassing, so let me stay the government a bit of embarrassment. But we are not doing as well as we should be doing on a lot of these critical sectors that are important to enhance the well-being and the welfare of our citizens. Then, of course, once the macroeconomic environment gets better and better, we should also be able to unlock greater private sector financing, not just, especially foreign private sector financing. Because right now, government has been bearing a disproportionate brunt in terms of financing of critical sectors, and that's not ideal. That's destabilizing. Yeah. So then, of course, the issue of property rights in agriculture. That's another key institutional reform. Yeah, that must be now finalized.
Okay. We could go on and on and on, but well, as we round off, economist Gwanyanya, the target month-on-month inflation from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe's latest monetary policy statement placed at 3 to 10, between 3 and 10% by December 2022. That's the inflation decline target from around 25% where we are right now. Do you think that is achievable?
Yeah, it is quite achievable.
Okay.
From the measures that I talked about coming out of Treasury and from the Reserve Bank measures. If you look at the time frame now, from the implementation of these measures and the impact so far, you are tempted to believe that a target of Reserve Bank. But, you know, when inflation starts going down, or when the exchange rate starts firming up, it actually creates another cycle of appreciation and price adjustments, downward price adjustments. Same as if inflation is going up, it is also a creator of inflation. So what we are seeing is things are starting to work now. The month-on-month inflation is starting to go down from around 30% to 25%. We expect this month to be also lower. But even in the global economic space, we're also starting to see other commodities softening. I can talk of oil, crude oil, right? It's going down. We've seen the price of fuel going down in Zimbabwe. I can also talk of the crude oil for edible oils. It's going down. If you look at the price of cooking oil, it was around
$5.50, $6.
yes, but it has now gone down, $4 thereabouts. So that also tells you the global economic factors had an impact, as an effect on the inflation outcomes. And what we're starting to see on the global front will support sustenance of inflation, sustenance of price deceleration, inflation deceleration, and exchange rate appreciation. But more importantly, I think there's a measure of political will, because the fear is always, as we head towards an election, all these efforts are going to be upset by the politicians. But we have seen now the president coming in to support the measures coming out of Treasury and Reserve Bank. I think the biggest gift that any government today will do to its, can bring or give to its citizens is stability. Because if there's no stability, they've got headache of salaries. If there's no stability, they've got headache of the living standards. If there's no stability, social service delivery. He's talking about the whole situation in the hospitals, situation at schools. But look here, this is coming as a result of us spending beyond the budget because of inflation. It did not be the situation. We should have spent within the budget and maybe catered for those social services. So I think stability is the first step, and all other issues are going to fall in place.
Now, Dr. Chitamba,
Yes, sir.
3% month-on-month inflation rate by
3%.
December, between 3 to 10% by December 2022. Is that feasible?
It's feasible, yes, definitely. But there are downside risks, especially with respect to the upcoming plebiscite.
Okay.
Normally, we see in most countries, the year to an election, public spending actually balloons out of control.
Okay.
And I think for me, that's a major downside risk. But so far, the government rhetorically is indicated willingness and commitment to stick to this disinflationary and stabilization reform agenda. But the election for me is a significant downside risk in terms of the attainment of the inflation target by December.
Well, viewers, sorry to cut you short. Our program has come to an end. It was quite exciting. So these were two economists. To my right was economist Persistence Kwanyanya. Thank you, Persistence, for turning up. Then to my left is Dr. Prosper Chitambara. Thank you, Dr. Chitambara, for turning up.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so for these and other programs, please do not hesitate to visit our other platforms. Our website is www.newzimbabwe.com, our YouTube channel, newzimbabwe.com, our Facebook page, newzimbabwe.com. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your viewing.